Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Tuesday, September 13th, 2022, and I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by the two other amigos, Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap. Guys, how you doing here today?
Depressed.
I think we would both be doing better if our teams won. It's really weird being the only guy on the podcast with glasses. That's weird. I'm used to George being the one with glasses, me without, but it looks weird. I just noticed that. But no, anyway, back to football. No, it's depressing. Titans lost in a heartbreaking loss at the very end of the game, and Packers got slaughtered in preseason week 4. So, rough week.
Preseason week 4. You guys excited for week 1 of the NFL season coming up on Sunday? Been waiting all summer for this. Cannot wait.
Yeah.
I mean, for the people that won their weeks in fantasy, they're going to be like, nah, I'll take last week. If you're like me, where I did not have the greatest week in a lot of places, yeah, I'll take a redo on week 1. Let's just do that. But the Eagles held on and barely beat the Lions, so I'll just count that as week 1 in my side. But on today's show, we're going to hit some NFL news and notes. We got a lot of injury news to talk about from this week in the NFL. We're going to bring back quotes of the week. We're going to talk about some waiver wire guys that you can add to help your teams going into week 2 and beyond. And we are going to talk about this coming week's Thursday night game, a good one between the Chargers and the Chiefs. Make sure you find us on thecouchgms.com, our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at The Couch GMs, and our Discord chat where we are keeping you up to date on everything 24/7. Link of that down in the description. Guys, let's just jump into NFL news. In the description of this rundown, we talk about injury news here first. Dak Prescott is the top of the news. He broke his hand in their loss last night and is getting surgery. He will miss multiple weeks. So first, let's start on the NFL side of things. Where is Dallas going to go at quarterback? Are they going to stick with Cooper Rush? Are you going to see a potential trade candidate go there? What are you guys thinking?
I think it's going to be Cooper Rush, personally. I think they're just going to stick with Cooper.
Same.
I don't think they're going to go out and trade. I'm worried about the Cowboys in the sense that, how good are they going to be without Dak? But when they missed time with Dak last time, Zeke fell off the boards completely. Like, he was not worth rostering. Not worth starting, I should say, in leagues when Dak went down. And they're already struggling at receiver, and now these receivers are probably going to take a hit even more. How are you guys feeling about the fantasy assets on Dallas?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think they're going to ride with Cooper Rush. To answer George's question, I don't think they're going to shock the world and go trade for Jimmy Garoppolo or anything like that just because of cap, and Dak will be back eventually. But in terms of fantasy, I was really high on CeeDee Lamb coming into the season. I was really high on Dalton Schultz especially. I thought he could finish as a top 5 tight end. I still think with a guy like Cooper Rush, he might be the favorite target. But CeeDee Lamb, he's coming down the rankings for me. Zeke, you already mentioned it. Snyder, he's coming down the rankings for me. And it wasn't just Dak. They lost another offensive lineman in that game. So I think they're down 3 starters already along the offensive line, and they could not produce any points when Dak was in there. They couldn't really establish anything because the offensive line is just so beat. So Dallas, unfortunately, they have to figure out things quickly or they could be heading for a top 10 draft pick come next season.
Yeah, and I was kind of coming in prepared to put out some fires on these Cowboys guys that didn't do well. Because, example, CeeDee Lamb had not a great game. He had 11 targets. He caught 2 of them. But you got to think, that would correct to the mean. But now that you don't have Dak, you don't know what kind of production you can get from the quarterback position. You don't really know. Dalton Schultz, he was the one guy on that team, besides maybe Noah Brown, who no one had, that actually had a decent game. So that still worked out for you if you ended up drafting and playing Dalton Schultz. But everyone else, not great. If Dak was still there, I still think I would have been confident. You got to roll with these guys a few more weeks, see what happens. Now, I don't really like it. I'm like you guys. I'm concerned.
And, it goes to show how much NFL teams should focus on the backup quarterback position. Do not punt the backup quarterback position. I've seen teams before whose backup quarterbacks are so laughable, but the starter's so good, so they don't care. And then the starter goes down, and suddenly the team goes from playoff contender to a joke like that because of a quarterback. Now, there's other teams. I know George is like giddy over there thinking about Nick Foles coming into the game, but there's other teams that have good backup quarterbacks that can come in and really produce just as well. Um, it it really is an underrated position.
Yeah, I just don't think there's enough talent for elite backup quarterbacks. If they're good enough, they're one of the top 32. If not, like, it's not worth the $5 million extra, in my opinion. So I'm all for, if you have an elite guy. If you have like two middle tier, that's one thing. If you have an elite guy, feel free to punt the position, because even like you mentioned, Nick Foles, like not one person in the Eagles organization was like, everyone each week, well, we have Nick Foles, our season's over anyways. Like Chase Daniels, he's made a living off of being a backup. If you had to start Chase Daniels for 4 weeks, you would be very disappointed on, or have low expectations for your team. So the backup, it is important, but there's just not enough talent, um, in my opinion.
Speaking of Chase Daniel, randomly, I feel like I saw out there. Isn't he still in the league? And I heard he was going to be
He's the
joining
Chargers
Monday
backup.
Night Football. Yeah, he's going to be joining Monday Night Football now weekly after the game to be part of their crew while he's still playing. I don't understand how that worked, but I saw something about that come over Twitter. I'm like, that's really odd.
I also don't know why they're like, let's go out of our way to get Chase Daniel, because that's not exactly the guy I'd be looking at. But
I don't know.
Speaking of quarterbacks, he's not the only quarterback that got injured. Dak, that is. Mac Jones is suffering from back spasms. It's not considered serious, and he should play next week.
Yeah, I think Mac Jones will be back out there.
Yeah, I don't see that as being an injury issue, but where are you at on the Patriots after this week?
I think Jacoby Myers is still their number one option. It's not a great offense, though. And then Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, I mean, they're splitting. So which one has the hot hand each week? Ramondre probably gives you a little bit more in the passing game if you're in a half-point PPR, full-point PPR. But if you can, fade away from your Patriots, especially in a matchup this week against the Steelers, which we'll talk more about on Thursday, like we saw what they did to the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, that's not a defense you want to play a lot of people against.
I think at this point you don't really want any Patriots on your fantasy team in general. I think you're trying to shy away from them as much as possible. You're going to have to play the matchups. If you see a really weak matchup, or you see a team that has a really bad run defense and you're stuck in bye week hell, maybe you'll want to throw Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson in there. Or you see a team that's been giving up 50 points a week to the wide receiver position, maybe you give Jacoby Myers a flex spot for that week. But otherwise, you're really trying to avoid using any Patriots at all at this point. But I think it's more of a question of, are you really that disappointed in the Patriots, or are we actually a little impressed by the Dolphins?
Personally, I'm a little impressed by the Dolphins. Like, I know they had a decent defense last year, but the Patriots, as much as they were a middling team, they should have hung in that game better than they did. Even so, I'm impressed by the Dolphins. They put together something pretty good down there so far.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins, they did look impressive in their week 1 game. It is so weird that Tua is now 4-0 against Bill Belichick. Like, I need to see another week to be completely like, okay, the Dolphins are for real. I mean, I did pick them in our predictions to be my 7th seed, so they had some expectations coming in for that one. And also, if you didn't see on Twitter, if you ever go to a game and you go tailgating, make sure to turn off your grill, because somebody in Miami left their grill on and it like ignited and it burned up, a dozen cars or so. So definitely, if you haven't seen it, hit Twitter for some pictures. But there's a quick PSA for you. That has nothing to do with fantasy.
Has everything to do with fantasy, because we go to see our fantasy players in person. No, I mean, I'm with you. And if you're using a charcoal grill, make sure you're actually putting out those embers too. That's just another way to add on top of that. But we'll move on to the running back position, because the 49ers continue to be the most frustrating running back team in the NFL. And it's again because of injury, because Eli Mitchell left their game with a knee injury. We are told it'll hold him out multiple weeks. And now when you look at the running back position, I somewhat question if there's anybody that's a viable replacement. Like, you're going to get more carries to Trey Lance. You're going to get more carries to Deebo Samuel, who's obviously already rostered. Are there any running backs on that team that you like?
Yeah, I mean, you got, like you said, you mentioned Trey Lance. I mean, Trey Lance had 13 rushing attempts in this game. Deebo Samuel had 8. Eli Mitchell had 6.8 yards per carry before going down. So Jeff Wilson, who is allegedly the top possible replacement for Elijah Mitchell, you'd think that he's going to get the bulk of the carries. He's going to be worth starting, but he had 9 carries for 22 yards, averaged 2.4 yards per carry. Like Eli Mitchell was able to run, so it's not like it was just a stout run defense shutting him down. Eli was able to run, and Jeff Wilson came in and did nothing. So I think that again, most people are going to go out there and target Wilson, but I think the guy you might want to keep an eye on is the rookie Tyrion Davis Price. Um, he wasn't active for game day, so obviously he doesn't have any carries because he was a healthy scratch. But I think he's worth noting, and the 49ers are really notorious for developing young talent, developing running backs out of nowhere. And I think this is a guy that could just burst onto the scene within the next 2 weeks. And, it might be a frustrating split between everybody, or maybe they do utilize Debo more, but I think Price is definitely a way to look for the future.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you one more name. Because if you're in a fab league or something like this guy you're probably not even going to have to pay. And that is Jordan Mason. He's an undrafted free agent rookie this year. He was activated over Tyrion Davis Price, which I still think Price has potential to be in this matchup. So I did like Snyder throwing his name in there. But Jordan Mason, very explosive. He was the reason they felt comfortable moving on from Trey Sermon. They didn't think that he would be able to get back onto their practice squad or back onto their roster. They felt like they had to keep him, how well he played in the preseason. And let's look back just in 2021. Raheem Mostert comes in. We're expecting big things. Knee injury, week 1. They have a higher draft pick, and then it wasn't undrafted, but a 6th-round pick in Elijah Mitchell that they rode with him with the hot hand. So Jordan Mason, he's a guy that you might want to consider picking up and just see, because you could probably get him, 2 or 3 fab dollars to start the season, and then you might get a starting running back.
So basically what we're saying here is take a couple NFL free agents, take some guys on this roster, the practice squad, take some players at other positions. Whatever you want to do, take all of their names from the 49ers, put them on a dartboard, throw, and whatever you land on, that's the guy you should pick up. It is a crapshoot. The 49ers are one of the most frustrating teams to try to find a good running back from, but take some notes, because if you do guess right, if you do pick up Jordan Mason, he becomes the guy. If you do pick up Tyrion Davis Price, and he becomes the guy, or maybe they even do roll with Jeff Wilson and he's gonna get a bulk of carries and he will be valuable. If you do pick right, it could be a game-changing move for you this season, but right now it's honestly hard to tell.
It's very true. Like, we have the tight end dartboard. We're now going to make the San Francisco running back dartboard. I like it. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers that backfield for now. I'm sure we're going to touch on a little bit more when we talk about some waiver replacements. Going on to the Steelers, I know, Tyler, you're going to talk a little more about this afterwards because you kind of called it. Najee Harris left the Steelers game early with a foot injury. It may be related to his previous injury. I feel like there's not a lot of details out there on it. And they don't consider it serious, but he could miss some time. Here we are. I mean, we knew it was a possibility when you were drafting a first-round running back that had a Liz Frank injury. But Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, the injury definitely made me nervous, and I tried to say that in drafts I would try to avoid him if I could. Some people did call me crazy, and some people even reached on him even afterwards. But it's not surprising that he's hurt, but it is frustrating. I mean, it is a guy you drafted high. And I could say, "Oh, well, told you so." He could get hurt. You could say that all day, but you have Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, other guys that you're talking about with potential injury risks in the top 2 rounds. And these are the kinds of reasons why people try to shade towards the no running back theory. Go with the wide receiver, get the bigger points, stay away from these risky running backs. But with all that being said, look, if you have Najee Harris, it's time to look at other options. You go with the Steelers backup. Is there a free agent that maybe you're targeting? That's something that you're definitely going to have to think about and look at. And if you're questioning or if you're on the fence with this, listen to our waiver segment or read George's waiver article that we posted on the couchgms.com, and we'll be able to help you out.
Yeah, just real quick with Najee Harris, though, it is worth noting that the X-rays did come back negative, and he should be good to go for Sunday. So you survive this week, you should be able to play him. And if you draft him in the first or beginning of the second, you're going to play him.
But are
But
you going to play him
maybe
though?
it's
Like if he's coming off an injury, he already was looking kind of shaky in preseason, and now he's looking. I mean, he was doing pretty well, but he did get injured again. Like you don't have any concerns with this guy, any fears that maybe he won't make it through the game, even if he's active. You don't have any fears. You're still starting him no matter what.
yes. He's the. I know you're not a huge fan of him, but the amount that they use him, the amount that he gets his work, like if he's out there, he's going to get played. It's the same thing with Christian McCaffrey. Every week you feel like, you know, I might lose this guy in the first quarter. You know, Elijah Mitchell, same thing. Like if he was, you lost him in the first week. It's a part of the football, part of fantasy. People get hurt. If they say Najee Harris is good to go, then you play Najee Harris.
No, I don't think I'm. I do have Najee Harris in a league, and I do honestly believe that when it comes down to it, I will probably have him in my lineup. But I'm not gonna go out here and say that it's Najee. Draft him early. He's heavily utilized. Easy start. Like I think there's definitely some confidence issues with Najee Harris with his uh, injury coming into the season. Now he has another foot injury. Whether it's X-rays come back negative or not, it's concerning. And yes, he's heavily utilized, which makes him so valuable. But it's also what makes him so scary. Like they don't take a break on him and let him relax and send him back out there later in the game. Like they are using him and. I've seen injuries in the past from people that are too heavily utilized. They're just going to re-aggravate it. If I have a strong backup candidate, maybe I'm looking elsewhere. Maybe I'm considering it.
Yeah, you'd have to have a pretty strong backup candidate in my opinion, and I think we'll hopefully know more before this week to have an idea of like if he appears to be limited, then I would start looking the other way. If it looks like, oh yeah, they're just gonna roll with it, I feel like we have too much draft capital to bench. So I'm like kind of with Cody on that, but we'll talk about it more on Thursday when we hopefully hear more on the injury report from this week, and then we'll get an idea of like who we would start over him if we have the option. Um, but really quick, we have a couple more injuries to hit. Hamstrings at the wide receiver position was apparently a big thing. Both Chris Godwin and Keenan Allen both left their games with hamstring strains. Chris Godwin will miss a few weeks, it was announced, and Keenan Allen is apparently getting scans on Monday. We have not heard anything as of recording the podcast, but the Chargers play on Thursday, so I really don't expect him to play this week.
Yeah, I think you can rule Keenan Allen out for the Thursday night game. Even if it's soft tissue, they're going to give him the 10 days rest, even if the scans come back pretty clean. But I wouldn't be surprised this was a few week, because he instantly grabbed that hamstring on a route, so that tightened up or pulled severely.
Yeah, it's definitely concerning. Obviously, even when Keenan Allen did go down, the Chargers still had no issues moving the ball at all. But Cody, what happened there a little bit? There's one of your favorite players that once Keenan Allen went down, especially like I was really expecting Mike Williams to just ball out, and I feel like he was kind of a letdown. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely didn't have the week that, as someone who's been high on him all season or all off season, I say, that you were expecting. But at the same time, we dealt with this last year. He went through spurts. We've seen it with, Mike Evans. And I think it's a good reminder that week one, it's not the time to panic. It's not the time to overreact. It's not time to some of these guys we're talking about. We talked about Najee Harris, that talked about Damian Harris a little bit ago. Like, we're not saying go out and cut these guys. They're just things that caught our attention. Mike Williams, that caught our attention, but I still think he is strong moving forward. He's going to be in a high-powered fight this week, and he's going to be without Keenan Allen being the number one target. So I think moving forward, he looks even better until Keenan Allen's back, and then we'll see if Keenan Allen retakes the number one spot or if Mike Williams holds on to that job.
Guys,
The
something you
most
don't
interesting
know
thing.
about
Go
this
ahead.
podcast, one big thing that the fans out there don't know is every single week we record this podcast, without fail, the second we are done recording the podcast, some big news breaks. It always happens. And then we have to try to get out to you on social media rather than in the podcast. Since it just broke now, I'd rather get it through in the podcast since we already talked about him. Dak Prescott is looking at a possible return either October 30th against the Bears, or they will wait until after their bye, which is probably more likely November 13th against the Packers. So there's your estimated timeline on the return of Dak Prescott. I'm sorry to cut us off in the middle of talking Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. George, I know you had something else to say, but I just wanted to get the news out there. So Go ahead, George.
No, I appreciate that, and that's a little bit of a long timeline there for Dak, but we kind of expected it with a broken bone in his hand. But the most interesting thing about the stat lines in this game, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 receivers on that team had 4 targets, and that was leading the team. So not only was it Keenan Allen, Mike Williams was also on that list, Josh Palmer, who was the guy that Cody liked, Gerald Everett, their tight end. They had a backup tight end on that list. They had DeAndre Carter, who has only ever been a return specialist in the NFL. He had 4 targets and a touchdown. Like, I am a little worried that this team is going to want to spread the ball out a lot more than they have in the past. I mean, I think people like Keenan Allen, you're pretty much safe with. He's a target monster that has a really good rapport with Justin Herbert. Mike Williams, probably going to be way better than 2 catches for 10 yards most weeks, but this might be a slightly different version of the Chargers offense than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and we've seen both styles before, right? We've seen teams who do spread the ball out and everybody gets some targets, and it ends up being really hard to stop because you can't focus in on any one player. Anybody can beat you. We've also seen the teams like, this week with the Raiders and the Vikings targeting their number one receiver and dominating. We've also seen those kinds of styles take off. So the Chargers could very well lean in a direction where they start spreading the ball out more, or maybe this is a week one kind of thing just to keep people on their toes, and maybe they'll change back into their old ways and start targeting heavily on wide receivers 1 and 2. I think Austin Eckler will always be involved in the passing game as long as he's healthy. But definitely something worth monitoring because some values of these receivers might go up or down based off of how they run their offense.
Definitely agree. And then the last thing we have to hit here in news really fast is last year's Defensive Player of the Year, All-Pro linebacker TJ Watt suffered what is believed to be a torn pec. He's getting second opinions on if he needs surgery or not. I think it appears that he does, and if he does get surgery, he will most likely miss the rest of the season. So that is a huge blow, not only for the Steelers, but for the NFL, because he is a superstar and out here breaking records and everything. That's really sad to hear.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It's definitely a tough loss for the Steelers. TJ Watt, we hope that he has a quick recovery and maybe he won't need surgery and will be back because the game is better when he's on the field. But George, are you ready for your favorite segment, Quotes of the Week?
Yes, I am.
Guys, thanks again for listening. And the support for the Couch GMs podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. It's the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the Ultimate Men's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. And guys, join over 5 million men worldwide, including all of us Couch GMs who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer to you, 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code CouchGMs. That's COUCHGMS at manscaped.com. Listen, the performance package is amazing. It's included with a bunch of different items that will really help the family jewels downstairs. You can get the Lawnmower 4.0, which is a trimmer. Look, guys, I'm not going to lie. I've had times where I decided to do a little shaving down there, but one thing you don't realize is you drip some hair on the floor and then someone comes home and they're like, why is there hair on the floor? Where'd this come from? And you got to try to make up some weird excuse. The Lawnmower 4.0 is waterproof, so you can actually shave in the shower now. You can just let all that evidence go right down the drain. You can be looking great without having to have any weird explanations. But my favorite product is the Crop Preserver. I got it right here with me. This is a ball deodorant, but it's also a anti-chafer. So it's a lotion that you can put on. Listen, we're guys, we're active. We like to run. We like to play sports. Maybe you're playing some pickup football with the guys. You're sweating a lot. Sometimes you start to smell. You can put some deodorant in your armpits, but sometimes you start to smell a little bit south and you don't really have anything for that. That's what the Crop Preserver's for. It's to make sure that if you're hanging out with your girl afterwards or she's your cheerleader on the sidelines for you, you go over, you talk to her, she's not going to be smelling anything funky. But also, it's an anti-chafer. I got some big thighs. They rub together. Chafing is the worst. You start chafing, you start hurting. Makes your entire day uncomfortable. It makes everything you're doing uncomfortable. I recently just went to the beach. We walked the entire boardwalk. I put the Crop Preserver on before I went down. I did not chafe once. It was the most comfortable I felt. I'm no longer afraid to say yes to a long walk, to a hike, to going out and doing something, that might cause some chafing, because I got the crop preserver now and it has reduced everything for me. We need to make sure we are feeling fresh, looking fresh. Best way to do that is manscaped.com. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code CouchGMs at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code CouchGMs. CouchGMS. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
Quotes of the week takes us first to Atlanta, where Falcons head coach Arthur Smith talks about another late game collapse for the Atlanta Falcons franchise. And he says to the media, "You buried us in May, bury us again. We don't care." So obviously trying to hype his team back up, because we know that the media did not expect Atlanta to be a good team. And now all of a sudden they're the joke of memes and everything again. What do you guys think Atlanta is going to do to rebound after that horrible collapse in the fourth quarter again?
Can I just say that I'm really happy with the way Marcus Mariota played.
Yeah.
I loved the way that he was out there really controlling the team. It looked like he had no fear. It didn't look like he was making just the safe throws because he's afraid of losing his job again, like you usually expect from a guy who gets a second chance. He was out there slinging it, running it, like he had the whole team on his back. They were picking him up after his rushing touchdown, holding him on their shoulders. Like the team was rallying behind Mariota, and I think that's really cool to see. And I think the biggest thing to note on that, I mean, obviously I'm a Mariota lover, but the biggest thing to note on that is like people usually will like start chanting for the backup when you draft a rookie quarterback, and Desmond Ridder is just sitting there in the wings. I think Mariota playing this well could push off the debut of Desmond Ridder further down the line. I know there was potential talks of him. We were guessing probably by like week 4 or 5 that he takes over. But, if Mariota continues to play well, win or lose, like he might keep this job here. And I think it's best for the Falcons and for Ridder to have him sitting a little bit longer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is, a great tactic for Arthur Smith. I don't really know if they'll rebound. Still don't think they're a very good team. And I think you're confusing Ridder with Pickett, who we thought might take over by week 4. Because Ridder definitely needs some time to develop. So I think Mariota being there is a nice asset for him, and hopefully they can both have decent careers. I know we're in quotes of the week though, but since we talked about breaking news. Kyle Shanahan did confirm that Elijah Mitchell would miss 8 weeks. So that just came in as recorded too. So now you're 8 weeks without Elijah Mitchell. Hopefully you have an IR spot. But if not, Jeff Wilson is currently RB1. But like I said, those 2 other names that we talked about, Jeff Wilson will probably be the hot waiver wire ad. So go grab those other 2.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I guess we're recording at a good time here because we're able to get this news into the podcast, but it's kind of frustrating that it always tries to come out just a little bit too late.
Yeah, and
we'll talk slightly more about San Francisco.
If your league doesn't have an IR spot, like talk to your commissioner. Make that happen. I mean, you shouldn't be forced to have a dead roster spot or be forced to cut somebody from your roster just because of an injury. You should be able to stash the guys that you drafted on your IR spot. So if you don't have one, make sure you talk to your commissioner, have a vote on it, make them put it into effect for next season, but definitely get that IR spot added. And real quick, before we move on, guys, I just want to throw in one little piece of news here. So I know we talked about strategies before with fantasy football, and I know we talked about, dropping a player, you're not going to use to pick up somebody from Monday night. For a Thursday night game. We've talked about that strategy before. We've talked about, picking up guys that are starting the season on IR and stashing them on your team. But one other thing to look at, and I forgot to mention this because I don't play in a lot of Yahoo fantasy leagues, but the few Yahoo fantasy leagues I do have, all of them, you're allowed to stash any player on your IR with the designation of out. So if a guy is ruled out for the game, like J.K. Dobbins was or George Kittle was, they're not going to be a long-term IR sit. But you can throw them on your IR, pick up somebody else. Most likely, you're already rostering a backup for those guys. Maybe not for a guy like Kittle. If you drafted him so high, maybe you did have to use it to pick up a backup tight end. But if you do have that, if you're in a Yahoo league that does allow that, make sure you're using that to your advantage. Throw everyone who's out onto your IR, pick up some potential breakout guys for the week, and see what they do. It could really help your team out. You might be able to get the top waiver ad before anyone else even gets a chance to have them because you had a chance to stash them. So just wanted to throw that little piece of advice out there.
That's
I
great
like it.
advice.
That's good.
Think ESPN also does that, or it's at least in the commissioner settings. I believe it's also in Sleeper as well. I think NFL is the only one that hasn't added that option for you to add it to your leagues. As Tyler takes a picture of his cat.
Yeah, sorry guys. My fiance thought our cat got out because she did escape last week and we had to go catch her. So she thought she got out, was freaking out. So I wanted to send a picture of confirmation to make sure she knows the cat is still here. So sorry about that, guys. Just putting some fires out.
All right. Well, putting some fires out. I think that is a great way to lead into our next quote. Because Aaron Rodgers was talking about his loss, which just seems to be the new tradition that the Packers get destroyed week 1 because they treat it like preseason. He said, look, it's tough to win in this league and definitely tough to win when you get in your own way too many times. I feel like we did some good things, but maybe we got to get more touches for Jonesy and Dillon. The big reason we're going to talk about is that last line, more touches for Jonesy and Dillon. A.J. Dillon already was number 2 in the team in targets, I believe, or maybe even led the team by the end of the game. Aaron Jones, he had some catches, he had some targets. He did lead. Jones did lead.
Yes.
I mean, Dillon did lead.
Dillon did lead. Yes.
Yeah, Jones was involved.
Jones was tied for second.
Tied for second. Didn't get as many carries as they liked. Both him and Matt LaFleur have talked about it. And I know I already said don't overreact to week 1, but I do think officially both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon should be considered every week starters from moving on.
I mean, I would have argued you on A.J. Dillon before this week, but now seeing that A.J. Dillon not only doubled the amount of carries Aaron Jones did, which, like you said, is not going to be a normal thing, but 10 carries, 6 targets, I'll take that in my starting lineup every week. If they want to keep those numbers similar to that, yeah, I will say this is a 2-back system.
Yeah, I mean, touches and targets can be a blurry subject sometimes. We talk about a guy like Derrick Henry who doesn't catch the ball at all, but he's guaranteed to get 20 carries a game. Then you have a guy like A.J. Dillon who, he's might not be getting that many carries, but he's getting a lot of touches. If he's still touching the ball 20 times a game, he's still getting the ball as much as a guy like Derrick Henry, and we can watch what he can do with it. It definitely makes him valuable. It's reasons why Kareem Hunt was so valuable despite being a backup there for years now. But, talking about Aaron Rodgers, Cody, just real quick, how about Aaron Rodgers' block on Zadarius Smith? Did you see that?
Dude, it was my favorite part of the game. And I know that it did not go well for Aaron Rodgers, but literally that play was the moment I was like, okay, Rodgers, like that, we scored on the next drive, or like we scored on that drive. Like that propelled us to get our first points. Like, I don't care what you say, like him going after Zadarius, there's been a lot of back and forth in the media about how the Zadarius situation was handled at the end, how they didn't want to give him a contract. Zadarius wanted to be a Packer for life. It didn't work out. So then he picked Minnesota because he gets to play the Packers twice a year. He got his sack. He got his forced fumble. So Zadarius definitely won the first battle, but I just loved Rodgers. I know my fiance was like, Aaron, what are you doing? I'm like, no, he's letting this team know, like, screw this guy. And he went after him. He didn't win, but it was still my favorite play from week 1.
And
across all the games.
It was still all in good fun because if you watch the whole clip, like it's Aaron still gets up, goes up to Zadarius Smith, gets in his face, and at first you're like, no way he's going to try to fight this guy. But really, they're just laughing, joking around, smiling the whole time. And I'm glad that people can still keep football fun. It doesn't have to be that serious all the time. But speaking of serious
football fun,
let's go to a very not serious quote. George, you know what? Go ahead, finish us off with the best quote of the week.
All right, best quote of the week. Yeah, keeping it fun is a good way to go into this. Tyreek Hill on head coach Mike McDaniel's decision go for it on 4th and 7. Quote, he's going to need a wheelbarrow for his nuts to carry around because he got a lot of cojones.
A lot of cojones. I don't think this one needs a follow-up. I think that wraps up
good enough
the quotes of the week segment, and we should jump into some who you should add waiver wire.
We're going to waddle our way into the waiver wire because that's what they did on 4th and 7, waddled their way into the end zone for a touchdown. Is that what we're going
It
with?
was a terrible joke, George.
Yeah, it was. I expected it to be.
That was my
Anyway.
second favorite thing, though, of the season or the week was when they cut to the fans and all the fans in the stands were waddling with him. That was like
Yes,
my second non-football favorite thing of the week. But George, you can
100%.
continue as I interrupted you or cut you off inappropriately. Oh, it was definitely
We're,
appropriate.
yeah, we're having a good time here. But yeah, we're talking about the waiver wire here going into week 2. So if you haven't heard already, Tyler already kind of plugged it on the couchgms.com. I have a waiver wire article posted with a couple of my favorites, which we can hit as we go here. But I think I want to talk about a lot of other guys that I do not have on the website that you can't go check, because after week 1, a lot of guys that have a lot of potential that you can add and could be long-term ads. So I'll let you guys toss up who wants to start. Let's talk about some guys I don't have on the internet.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start
All
us
right.
off with James Robinson, because this one's funny to me. So 2 years ago, James Robinson was the number 1 back for the Jaguars, looked amazing, was a must-have, must-start running back. And then last year, they draft Travis Etienne, and immediately nobody wants James Robinson anymore. Everyone just assumes Etienne's got it, like it's his job. Robinson's going to be worthless. And then Etienne gets hurt, and James Robinson takes over, and James Robinson crushes it. It was another like must-start guy last year while he was healthy. Now this year, again, like Etienne's healthy, so let's just forget James Robinson's a thing. No, James Robinson, all he did was go out there and put up 20 points in a half-point PPR league. Even with Etienne fully healthy and playing the game, James Robinson is proving time and time again that whether he is, a every down running back or not, he is still very valuable, and he should be rostered in every league. 47% owned is kind of laughable to me because he's a guy that I trust a lot more than some of these other fringe running backs. So is he a must start, must have in your lineup every week guy still? No, probably not. But he is definitely a guy that should be owned in every league. He's only 47% owned. So if you need a running back, that's probably the first guy I would target.
Yeah, if he's available, definitely go pick him up. I'm not trying to discredit that, but it is that he tore his Achilles is why everyone was so down on him this year, and we've actually never seen a running back after tearing his Achilles put up a top running back season after multiple seasons out. Like, it just doesn't happen. The Achilles seems to devastate the running back position. So James Robinson, he looked really good in week 1. He's looked a lot better than Cam Akers has coming back off of his, and he did it pretty quickly as well. So hopefully he can be the first, because he's been the first of a lot of things. But yeah, definitely go out and add him. I'm going to talk about a guy I talked about in our last minute edition. So maybe if you listen to the show, you already have him. But before I do that, little tease, I'm just going to run through the list quick of who's on George's article. So if you're looking for those guys and why, you can head over to couchgms.com. And that's Jameson Winston for quarterbacks, Jeff Wilson, Jalen Warren.
All right,
Eno
whoa.
Benjamin, and
Okay, we
Dontrell.
got Jameson Winston. We got Jerlin Warren. I don't know what that is. Cody, let's take a breath, run through them again so people know who they're going after.
First of all, I did correct myself. You're just delayed. But it's Jameson Williams
Dude.
at quarterback.
No, it's not.
Dude.
It's I'll go. Cody, I'll go. I got it.
It's Jameson Winston.
It's
There you
Jameis.
go.
No, it's just Jameis Winston.
Oh, you're right. Jameson Williams, the running. I am so tired.
Well, first off, if Jameson Williams is on your waiver wire, go add him and stash him. Like we said in the past, I think we actually said that in our last minute ads episode last week. But we're talking about Jameis Winston, the quarterback for the Saints. The rest of my list online, Jeff Wilson, who we talked about earlier in the show, Jalen Warren, who is the primary backup for Najee Harris, Eno Benjamin, another guy we talked about a little bit last week, Dontrell Hilliard, who is the pass-catching back for the Titans, Jarvis Landry, who proved to be the top target guy in New Orleans this week, Curtis Samuel, who was the top target guy in Washington, and Devin Duvernay, who may be the new Hollywood Brown in Baltimore.
Yeah, see, they did a much better job than I did. So Georgia just did that from the beginning. But hopefully you got a good laugh out of it. But the guy I was talking about was Josh Palmer. I mentioned him in the 2 podcasts ago, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But he had one of those guys with 4 targets. Keenan Allen's going to be out. Slots right into the wide receiver number 2 spot. Only 2.8% owned. So I'd go out and add him.
You see, I like Josh Palmer to an extent, but the way they're trying to spread the ball out makes me feel like they're not confident in him as a guy. So the guy on that team that I actually like better to add now, and I know he's a more widely owned guy, but you had some tight end problems already, is Gerald Everett. He got the same amount of targets. He was very effective in that role, and he's a guy that probably has staying power on top of Josh Palmer. Like, I don't know if I really like adding any wide receivers besides the fact that I'm more confident starting Mike Williams without Keenan Allen there. But Josh Palmer's the first stab if you want to take a shot at somebody in that offense.
Yeah, there's other tight ends worth noting as well. Not quite as big, and these guys might be more dart throws, but one big fantasy strategy is to just punt the tight end position completely and try to live off the waiver wire. So if that's what you're doing, two guys you can look at. OJ Howard did catch a touchdown for the Jaguars, and no, Texans. Sorry, OJ Howard did catch a touchdown for the Texans.
It's okay. I do it all the time.
But and at the same time, there's also Hayden Hurst. He is the CJ Uzama replacement for the Bengals, and the dude looked good. Like, he was the highly targeted on third downs. T. Higgins has a concussion, so we'll have to see when he comes back. Sometimes players return right away, sometimes they wait. But with T. Higgins out, Hayden Hurst's targets went up as the game went on. He actually finished with a pretty solid day. Again, not guys you're rushing to the waiver wire to pick up, but still guys worth looking at. But the guy that I want to talk about is another wide receiver. If I need a wide receiver in fantasy, the guy I want to go target is rookie Jahan Dotson. I was really impressed with him. He's only 6% owned in fantasy. And he was impressive. I mean, he had 2 touchdowns on the game, 3 catches for 40 yards. Now, I understand that's not a lot of targets. That's not a lot of receptions. You have Gibson was a lot heavier utilized in the passing game with 7 catches, Curtis Samuel with 8. But Jahan Dotson was their deep ball threat. He caught both of his touchdowns on verticals. He was able to beat the safeties, beat his man-to-man coverage twice for that deep ball touchdown. And, the more he starts doing that, the more that they're going to have to leave him on the field, if nothing else, to be a decoy. The more he's on the field, the more targets he's going to end up getting. I think this is definitely an exciting young rookie worth targeting. Again, not a guy that I'm picking up and immediately throwing into my starting lineup, but definitely somebody I'm targeting on the waiver wire.
George, you haven't said anything yet.
I threw out Gerald Everett, but okay, I'll go next, I guess.
I didn't like
so
that
we
one.
know you didn't like
Too
that
high
one.
owned.
Oh, well,
Then you're not going to like the next
my
guy.
next one then too, because Chris Godwin went down, and the next guy up, it seemed like in targets, was Julio Jones. So yes, another high owned guy, 54.6% owned. But if really Tom Brady is going to bring out the best in Julio Jones, which we haven't seen in a while, there's no doubt the talent's there, and you have to own him and probably have a good chance to play him while Godwin's not in the lineup, and that's going to be multiple weeks. And Tampa Bay's offense was not fantastic yesterday. Dallas's defense held pretty well. They just weren't in the game because their offense couldn't move the ball. And even still, Julio Jones made a solid impact on the game. So I'm excited to see, as he gets more ingrained in the offense, because he was a late signing, how much he could do from that role going forward.
Yeah, and Julio Jones is known for being that big body guy, that short-handed guy that you can throw to anywhere on the field. He's definitely the guy you want to target on third downs. But if anybody follows Ian Rappaport on Twitter, he would not shut up about Julio Jones' speed. They're saying that Julio Jones has been the fastest guy in camp for them. He ran the 3rd fastest play of his entire career this past game. I think he hit over 20 miles an hour, but still, he is lightning quick right now because he's healthy. As long as he stays healthy, like, Julio Jones might very well be their deep play threat. Tyler Johnson was a guy that they were targeting as the deep ball last year. Same with Scotty Miller, but we're not really seeing them. I know Tyler Johnson got cut. I think that the guy worth noting right now is Julio Jones. He might be their deep ball threat. Mike Evans isn't that guy. He is their red zone threat. So if they're going to use him as a deep ball threat and we know what he can do between the 20s, it makes him definitely more valuable, especially with Godwin down.
Yeah, and then just another name, if you're in a deeper league or so, I know it's scary betting on the Giants. They did win this week in a close game, but their number one target emerged to be Sterling Shepard. We've seen him play decent in the past. He had, or he had the most yards. He didn't have the most targets, I should say. Saquon Barkley had the most targets, but he had the most yards as any of the wide receivers. I still think Kadarius Toney looks really good, but the Giants seem not to like to use him for some reason. So until they start doing
He
Tony,
allegedly only played like 7 snaps or something like that. That was
Yeah, he
ridiculous.
wasn't very well utilized. Sterling Shepard did have the most receiving yards at 71, but it is worth noting that he did have one catch for 65 yards and a touchdown. Um, there was a broken play, safety wasn't over top, nobody made the tackle when he did catch the ball. So 65 of his 71 yards did come on one play. So maybe tamper expectations a little bit with Sterling Shepard, but still he was definitely utilized. I think the biggest issue is Daniel Jones, even with the win, uh, didn't look great. He's not a fantastic quarterback. I'm sorry, but he is not a playmaker. He's not the guy going out there and lighting up the scoreboard. So any receiver on a Daniel Jones team is not exactly a thrilling option.
No, but in startup and like matchup based starts, if he's healthy, Sterling Shepard's the guy I'm most willing to go with because we've seen him do it with Daniel Jones in the past. We know Sterling Shepard has talent and just no one seems to like him because he's on the Giants, which I guess makes sense. But there's been like Thursday night games where they go out there against another team that's not great and all of a sudden Sterling Shepard has 25 fantasy points. Like that's the kind of thing you can get. It's just not a consistent thing. So temper expectations, but know where to pick your matchups with someone like a Sterling Shepard.
And the final ones that I'm going to highlight here on the waiver, well, we have one more after this, but leads us into our next segment. So the last non Thursday night player that I'm going to highlight here is just Titans receivers in general. So there was two of them worth noting. Well, first off, Robert Woods is the number one for the Titans, and I also told you about Austin Hooper being a high target, but Austin Hooper didn't get any targets, and Robert Woods cost the first pass of the game and then didn't get a target the rest of the game. If your two guys that we thought were going to be heavily targeted aren't going to be played, that means somebody else is getting those targets. The first one is Traylon Burks. He is about 30% owned in fantasy leagues, so a little bit less owned than the other guy I'm going to talk about. But Burks was able to make 3 catches for 55 yards, and there were 3 big catches, three clutch catches. It looked like Tannehill was definitely trusting in Burks and not afraid to throw to the guy. But the one I think I want to highlight even more, he's 0.1% owned, is Kyle Phillips. This is a guy that just absolutely astonished everybody in camp, killed it in preseason, started off the game with a punt return that was absolutely gorgeous, and then ended up crushing it in the game. He had 6 catches, but he had 9 targets. The guy only played 50% of the offensive snaps and still saw 9 targets. When he's on the field, they want to go to him. He had 6 catches for 66 yards, including at the very end of the game. Titans only had a minute left to try to get in field goal range. Got down to third down. They needed a big clutch play. They went to none other than Kyle Phillips. It was an over-the-shoulder, gorgeous throw where he beat his man, toe tapped on the sideline. This is a guy they're trusting in big situations, little situations, any situation. He's a guy they're going to, and he's really looking good. He's a quick, shifty slot receiver. And, if he's getting 9 targets, only seeing 50% of the snaps, he's going to demand more snaps on offense if he keeps playing this way. So his targets are only going to go up as well. This is a definite guy that you can get real cheap. Honestly, people aren't even talking about him yet because he only put up about 7 points in fantasy. So um, he's still a guy that might not even be heavily targeted in waivers. You might be able to use small fab on him. But Kyle Phillips, 0.1% owned, but go grab him.
Yeah, I think Kyle Phillips is an interesting name, so I'm glad you brought him up. That one, you brought up a good point with the targets. He is he's a slot receiver. Like he's not going to play on the boundary, so he's never going to get your high snap counts just because unless they're in 11 personnel, if they're in their 2 tight end sets, which they like to run with Derrick Henry, he's not going to see his. So like 50-60% is probably like his ceiling. Um, and he's right up there too. And I know we just gave out a lot of waiver guys too, but again, remember it is just week 1. Don't overreact. I know Cam Akers put up a 0. I know Allen Robinson didn't do much if you think back to Thursday. There was a lot of other guys, put up lackluster compared to what you thought going in. But don't be going to drop Cam Akers for a Hayden Hurst or a Kyle Phillips or a Gerald Everett or something like that. Keep those guys. But those fringe roster ones, the ones you drafted late, the ones that you've already thought about cutting if you needed somebody, go ahead and drop them for some of these guys with those higher upside. The last waiver I do want to mention, but why don't I mention it when we get back from the little bumper and we just jump right into the TNF preview. Alrighty, so like I mentioned, we're going to talk the Thursday night game, which is a doozy as it kicks off on Amazon. The Los Angeles Chargers at the Kansas City Chiefs might be the best Thursday night game of the year. I know we talked about that for the opener, and that game was not, it was just weird. So hopefully it's a little bit better than the opening game, at least in terms of consistency and what the football looks like on the field. But that last waiver I do want to mention is Isaiah Pacheco. We've talked about him a lot. He did have double-digit fantasy points in half-point PPR. He led the team in carries. Now they were up big, so he did.
It's trap. It's trap.
He did get some second half carries, but what I don't think is a trap is his usage. I do think he's the number 2 guy behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire for now, with potential to overtake it. So again, this is another guy that you're not going to start out there if you're in some high upsides. If you don't trust Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we saw him break out last year with 4 really good games and then just faded off. Pacheco will be involved, but I don't think he'll get the amount of carries that we saw on a consistent basis. So interesting name. We talked about him a lot. He's been on a lot of the news and around, because Andy Reid said he's a bigger version of Jamal Charles and LaShawn McCoy or something like that weird at the halfway through training camp. So you get that kind of praise, he's definitely going to get looked at. But 12 carries for any Andy Reid running back is still impressive, no matter what the game situation is.
I don't think it is, though, because I've been trying to go through game logs here in the last few minutes. I don't think he got a touch until they were up 37-7. So they were just salting the game away at that point. Jerick McKinnon was getting touches way before he was. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was looking very solid at the beginning of the game, and he didn't even see the game until I think that was like late third quarter. Like, I see that as a trap just because, yeah, he looked very effective. Maybe he did earn himself a carry or two. Maybe in the long run, he will be somebody that starts to take touches because he's a talented guy. And we know Clyde Edwards-Helaire hasn't been special. But right now, I'm not even interested in looking at him just because he doesn't see the field until essentially the backups are out there. The game's over. Like, that doesn't scream, add this guy on the waiver wire to me.
So I hear what both of you are saying. I'll be kind of the tiebreaker here between the two of you, since that seems to be what it's like right now. I do 1000% see what George is saying. If the guy's not going to be utilized until the game is kind of out of hand, then really maybe he doesn't have as much value. On the other hand, my issue with it is he did see touches at the end of the game, and he did really, really well with it. Even though he didn't get utilized until they were up big, the fact that he did so well when he did get a chance tells me that he's going to start demanding more snaps. Like, take a look at Eno Benjamin. All right. I know this is a weird comparison, but Eno Benjamin in preseason, we talked about how he was like 0% owned, but he might be worth a stash on your team because he was playing so well in preseason that even though he was clearly the backup, he was doing so well when he did have touches that, coaches said he demanded playing time because he was doing so well. And now we go into week 1 and, James Conner wasn't doing bad, but, Benjamin was doing really well when he did see some snaps as well. So it kind of forced Benjamin on there. And now that's one of our waiver targets is Benjamin, which is not a guy I thought we'd be saying before we hit preseason, but now it is because he's demanding snaps. And Pacheco, he might not be the guy right now, but the fact that he's doing so well when he does get carries means he's going to demand more snaps. If he demands more snaps and starts doing well, it only takes one injury or, Clyde Edwards-Helaire falling back into his old ways for Pacheco to take over. So I'm not saying Pacheco should be one of your top targets. If, James Robinson's out there, go grab him. If, Julio Jones is out there, go grab him. If those guys are available, go snag them first. But if they're not available, if you're in a deeper league, or maybe you had a team full of guys who really are all fringe worthy players that sucked, or maybe they all got hurt and are going to miss significant time and they're stashing on your IR. Maybe you do have a lot of people to go target. If you do, Pacheco's not a bad name to look at.
Yeah, I think we're all agreeing in some way that there's potential there, just where if you see the patch of the field. And that's part of the fantasy too. Like, we can give you as much advice as we have, but they are our opinions. It's how we view the game. If you view it differently or your gut's telling you something, we always encourage you to go with your gut, because that's what we do. I mean, sometimes we leave it up to chance, but most of the time we just go with our gut. But let's talk more about this Thursday night game. There's a lot of people we're playing. Obviously, Travis Kelce. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Justin Herbert. I got to ask you guys, though, because of the down, I know I'm playing him, but Mike Williams, we talked about it a little bit at the top. Are you still putting him in your lineup? And we're going to assume Keenan Allen's out, because I think we're all on the same page that with a hamstring coming back in 3 days is kind of impressive. So we're going to assume that Keenan Allen is out.
I'm still playing Mike Williams because Keenan Allen's out. I think if Keenan Allen didn't have the injury, with how much I saw they were spreading targets, it'd be like, I'm going with my safe guy and I'm not going with Mike Williams. But now I feel like if there's anybody on that offense that has the best chance to go off, it is Mike Williams. And then you can also look at it as, yeah, he can end up going off and have a really good start to the week for you. Or if he does not go off, you gotta be like, well, it was one guy. I still have the rest of the week to make this up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't love Mike Williams right now because of how much they're spreading the ball out. But the thing is, this is going to be a high scoring game in my opinion. The Chargers do have a good defense, but the Chiefs have a good enough offense to still put up the big points. And I feel like it's going to be a shootout back and forth, which always bodes well for receivers. So in my opinion, yes, Mike Williams is still a starter. Um, I got to ask you guys a dumb question here real quick. So this past week,
No question, it's a dumb question.
every question is a dumb question when it comes from me. But so Patrick Mahomes, we kind of expected a bit of a down year from him without Tyreek Hill. We didn't think he had the same kind of weapons, and yet he went out and absolutely balled out with everybody on his team. Still looked phenomenal. And then you have Justin Herbert, which was one of the biggest players talked about in all of Twitter on Sunday because he looked unbelievably good. Like, I don't mean like he's just a solid quarterback that was getting yards. Like, he had plays where he's rolling out to his left and like jumping, turning his body, making cross field like he's making insanely sick throws, and he really does look like one of the quarterbacks of the future. If you guys had a chance to start an NFL team right now and you're moving forward with Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert, I know this sounds like a dumb question because we've been so high on Patrick Mahomes, but where they're at right now, moving forward, who would you rather have, Herbert or Mahomes?
This is like the ultimate Couch GMs
It
question.
is.
Like, this is like what Couch GMs do in their free time. They're like, well, who would you have here? What would you do here? And for me, it's very close. It's a very tough question. But I'd still go with Patrick Mahomes. I love Justin Herbert. I think he is a great player. And like I said, it's very close. But the age gap isn't big enough between Herbert and Mahomes for me to go. And Mahomes has done it. He's won a Super Bowl. He has the playoff experience. I mean, Justin Herbert looks good, but he's never been to the playoffs. So Patrick Mahomes, with his pedigree, with his background, I'll take him at 26, despite Justin Herbert being 24.
Yeah, I think Cody pretty much took my answer there too. I'll actually agree with you this time. Knowing that because Patrick Mahomes came into the league so young, that he's still only 26. Yeah, I'll take Mahomes to do that. You already have the proven track record, but I don't think you can go wrong with either of the two. So there's not really a wrong answer. I'll say that.
Yeah, and I think we'll see it for on next 8 to 10 years. We'll see that division twice a year, Mahomes, Herbert, and it'll be a lot of fun because I think they're both extremely talented, and they both have that gunslinger persona. Like, they're going to make crazy throws, they'll throw some picks, they'll make some boneheaded plays, but they have that, like, we're going to push the ball down the field and we're going to make it happen. And I do think there might be a little bit of an uptick for Patrick Mahomes because Andy Reid is there and he's such a great play caller. that I think we might be having that debate that we had with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, which one is it in a few years. But I think Patrick Mahomes will outplay Andy Reid coaching. Could be completely wrong on that, and I think he'll prove, just like Tom Brady has, that it's his talent. So that's a long-winded answer. I know we digressed from the actual Thursday night matchup, but that's because the guys that you're going to play, you're going to play Eckler, you're going to play Williams, according to all three of us. Tyler's the one on the most on the fence. Herbert, Mahomes, Kelsey, and Juju. I think Juju has showed that he has been the number one guy. He earned that right. So Juju Smith-Schuster so far has been the number one pass catching option. MVS is a deep threat, but you don't really want to play him on Thursday night. That's just my personal opinion. But
how about Mecole
you guys have any
Hardman?
other thoughts?
Any trust in that guy?
I personally, I like the fact that he was second on the team third on the team in targets. Travis Kelce was first, then Juju, then him. But I still have a hard time viewing him as a little more than a one-trick pony. And then you have another one-trick pony next to him in Marquez Valdes-Scantling. We went back to earlier in the offseason when it was like, who has the best chance of being the guy? And I thought it was Juju just because he fit a different mold than Mecole Hardman, Sky Moore, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And I think that kind of showed here. Those three got similar stats to what Juju did. So I'm out on Mecole Hardman unless I see him separate from the other two. And same thing with MVS.
Okay. Final question on this game, and it's not even for this game. A little bit of a waiver question again. If all three are available between Mecole Hardman, MVS, Sky Moore, and you have to pick one up, which one do you like better going forward?
So I have to pick one up.
You have to pick one up.
I wouldn't pick up any of them. But I'd say MVS. Maybe it's because his jersey, you can't see it, but it is still hanging. This package is still hanging on the wall behind me. But I'd say MVS. He has the 4 targets. He'll get a couple of deep plays. You can say the same exact thing about Mecole, which George probably will, but I'll say MVS.
Yeah, I'll go Mecole Hardman because I feel like he's probably the more likely, on top of getting his passing targets, to be used more like a gadget guy. Maybe he'll get a carry here or there in a game, a little end around kind of deal. So I'd go Mecole slightly.
All right, I'll go Sky Moore just for the heck of it then. You got the rookie, you got the up-and-comer. They're going to want to give him some targets for the future. So give me Sky Moore. Yeah, let's have some fun. Three-way split.
All right, so it's a 3-way split. So I think that means you have to let us know which person you would pick. But as always, it's another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. We're back to twice a week. And as a reminder, always take your Thursday night people out of your flex spot. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, guys, and one last reminder, do not panic. It's funny to hear me say that because the guys hear me like, I can't believe I'm losing. Like, this sucks. My team's horrible. They hear it every year. I ended up winning in the league that I was talking to them about at this time. So don't panic. It is week 1. You do still have plenty of time to come back. It's fantasy in general. Nobody likes to lose, but it is only week 1. You can build up from this. And like I said before, if you're going to lose a week 1's the one to do it. However, if you did win, congratulations. Keep listening to our podcast, and we will continue to help you win all season long, especially if you reach out to us for your lineup advice, waiver advice. Let us help you win a championship. Nothing would make us happier. Either way, this podcast is so much more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved.
Well said, Tyler, and thank you all one more time for listening in to the Couch GMs podcast. For Cody Roadcap and Tyler Snyder, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all later in the week.
Oh.